going after a person's mind has been done in history. Like, they go straight for the mind. They find a way to get there and change the way they think, change their whole worldview.
The ability to think critically, to listen, to learn, and then to think creatively to come up with new solutions. That's the most important human ability. I'm going to study that. Every human being is like an antenna. Most people's antenna doesn't get good reception because there's all sorts of static because they're watching commercials about junk food. So that's static in your antenna. So what you want to do is go for a walk in nature, clear the static out of your antenna, and then tune in, keep a little notebook and write down what you get. So these are practical things that all of us can do. And then we discover our own genius.
Logical thinking, I think we need it now more than ever because we are inundated with all kinds of false information. So we're like in echo chambers now, and we have to have the ability to discern what is true, what is false, and what is even brainwashing.
If you don't learn the principles of logic, if you don't learn how to make a reasonable, rational argument, if you don't learn what propaganda is, I guarantee you, you're being completely manipulated in all of your opinions, ideas, choices, and it's happening unconsciously. So you're becoming a slave to mostly advertisers. If you don't know this, you will be a victim of this. You will be eating things, you will be drinking things. You would never choose if you had a rational understanding of what is being foisted upon you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and please rate our show if you enjoy this episode. Many people are unaware of the incredible creative potential they possess. Yet, without proper guidance or a clear path to nurture these natural talents, we often fail to harness them. My guest, Michael J. Gelb, suggests that one effective method to unlock our creativity is by studying the revolutionary thinkers of the past. By understanding their ways of thinking and their skills, we can tap into our creative abilities. He's here to discuss his insights and discoveries further. Michael J. Gelb is a world's leading authority on the application of genius thinking. He is a pioneer in the fields of creative thinking, innovative leadership, and executive coaching. Michael is the author of 17 books, including How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. His books have been translated into 25 languages and sold over 1 million copies. In our conversation, Michael and I will explore the brilliance of historical figures and discuss how we can apply their methods to enhance our own lives and thinking, ultimately allowing us to unleash our potential and contribute to the world.
Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. So it's great to see you again. I've been looking forward to having you back on the show because our last discussion about creative genius and finding ways to channel our own inner Da Vinci was so fascinating. And I knew that I just had to have you back on the show. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me back.
I want to know, what is it about studying the brilliant geniuses of the past that is so alluring to you? Obviously, you're passionate about writing these stories and these biographies about these individuals. What is it that draws you to this? And is it significant to your own life and the trajectory of, your career and everything that you've pursued?
Sure. Thank you. So, yes, it is very significant to my own life because it is how I attempt to live my life, is applying the wisdom of these great heroes, these extraordinary beings who developed their gifts and improved the quality of life. The people I'm most interested in are people who enriched humanity. And so, yeah, what can we learn from them? What can I learn from them to live my life in a more fulfilling and productive and beautiful way? There was a motivational speaker named Jim Rohn. He was a big influence on Tony Robbins. And Jim used to say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And in contemporary science has actually validated what Jim Rohn said in his motivational speaking. We know that if the 5 people you spend the most time with are out of shape or addictive, or you're more likely to be out of shape, addicted to something, and complaining and whining the whole time. And if the people you surround yourself with are positive and healthy and giving and love life, you're more likely to be positive and healthy and giving and to love life. And I believe that's true, not just in terms of the actual humans you spend time with, but who do you spend time with intellectually? Who do you spend your free time with? I like to spend my free time with Leonardo da Vinci, with Socrates, with some of history's greatest geniuses. So yes, that's the method behind the madness.
That's good company you keep.
It's a pleasure to be with you as well.
Thank you.
I don't go on any old podcasts.
Yeah, that's why it's an honor to be with you, because you've impacted, so many people's life in such a positive way. So definitely, I feel blessed to be able to speak to experts like you. So, Michael, you use the word genius a lot in your books, and I was wondering, is it a subjective concept, or are there specific criteria we use to assess someone's genius?
Well, I could just give you my definition. Some people would use IQ or performance in a particular activity at a certain level, which are all have some merit. The way I think of genius, the geniuses that I focus on are the geniuses who change the whole world. So I like to look for what I call universal genius. And part of how I measure that is the universal genius touches all of humanity. So, for example, I mentioned Socrates. Socrates is a universal genius. Through his student Plato and Plato's student Aristotle, we got the whole system that we call academia. The word academy comes from the Platonic academy. The word university comes from the idea of universal knowledge, which Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle thought was really important. The word philosophy means love of wisdom, and the notion of organizing society around the quest for truth, beauty, and goodness comes from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So the other thing about those characters is they were well over 2,000 years ago. And my other criteria is it's not just universal, it's also timeless. And even though Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are Western figures, because there are other great geniuses like Confucius and Lao Tzu and so on and so forth, the dominant modality of how human life on the planet takes place now is profound. Everybody wants to go to university. Everybody wants to get an academic degree. Everybody wants to study this core of knowledge that these geniuses back in ancient Greece came up with. So to me, that's a positive, it's universal, it's timeless example of genius. So that's what I'm looking for, is you change the whole world, you change it for the better. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets Mozart. You hear Mozart, you don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to be from a particular culture. You hear, the overture to the Marriage of Figaro, you get excited. You get energized. Whoever you are, everywhere on the planet. So My highest interest is in universal, timeless, positive genius. Those are the people that I study and write about. Then there's being a genius in a given field, or being a genius just in your company or in your community, and then just being a genius in your family and your relationship. And the word comes from the same root as to generate, genesis, to give birth. So it's attuning to that higher intelligence that allows us to give birth to new ideas that will make the world better, whether it's in your relationship, your business, your community, your industry, or for all of humanity.
What I'm hearing is that there are two types of geniuses. One is that's universal and all-encompassing, and that it's all about contribution and making a difference in the world. And the other type of genius is more specific to a certain field. For example, like Mozart was a musical genius, and somebody like
Yes.
Einstein was a mathematical genius.
Yes, and LeBron James is a physical kinesthetic genius. Different
Right.
kinds of genius, different in different fields. I don't know if you ever come across Amma, the hugging saint, or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Pope Francis, who recently left us. But these people seem to me to have what I would call spiritual genius. They have a gift for seeing the unity of all of creation and helping other people experience that sense of loving kindness for all of creation. So that we might call that spiritual genius. So there are different types of genius, but the great spiritual geniuses, the great mathematical geniuses, the great musical geniuses wind up touching everyone. They wind up becoming universal. And that's why, so Leonardo da Vinci was known as the uomo universale, which is Italian for the universal human, because he represents all of the abilities and talents and gifts
A polymath,
that most people
right?
would aspire to have. Yes, the ultimate polymath.
Mm. What advice would you give to someone who's younger, or maybe not, who is on this quest to discover their own genius?
Yes. Well, first is to recognize what really helps is to recognize that another part of the definition of genius is that the word, do you know the idea of a genie in a bottle that you rub on the magic lamp and the genie emerges and you get these wishes? Well, your brain and your heart are the magic lamp, and you are the genie. You just have to summon your own personal genius. So all of us have access to genius possibility. It's wired into our brains. I mean, your brain has 100 billion brain cells, and the number of connections they can make is virtually unlimited. But it didn't come with a manual, which is why I have to write all these books. But the first most important point is to recognize it's something that's within you. And then, because if you don't think you have it, if you've been told in school that you're not smart or you don't have this ability or this talent, if you believe that, then you won't look for it. And if you don't look for it, you probably won't find it. So the very first thing I would tell that young person is you have the same magnificent endowment in terms of your neural blessing of 100 billion neurons as Leonardo da Vinci, as anyone who's ever lived. So how are you going to use it? Start getting curious about how to access that power. What are the best ways to do that? What are the best methodologies? And obviously, that's what I'm writing and teaching about. And I'm happy to discuss it further. If you want to know some more specifics about what to do, I'm happy to address that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So one of the simplest things people can do It kind of sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but it's read a lot. It's just curious that even in this time of AI and the internet and look everything up and get an instant answer to everything, many of the very smartest people I've ever met are always reading. They're always learning. They're always studying. Now, if you prefer to do it with your device, then just get good at curating the questions that you ask to Chat GPT or Perplexity or whatever you're working with. But we live in an amazing time where you can have access to all instantly and for free, but you just have to know what to ask. And it's by reading that you'll learn what to ask. So my advice to a young person would be to read and then read more. Read the great books. Start with the great classics. It's funny, I was at a conference in Nashville last month, and I was at the bookstore. They had my books in the bookstore, and I was doing a book signing. And this lovely young woman came up, and she was really very lively and curious, and we had a great conversation. She was asking about what I'd written, and I referred to Socrates. And she said, what has he published? I had to, like, I really, the person was probably 21 years old.
Did you look at her absolutely aghast?
No, I try to be kind and gentle and compassionate because if nobody's ever told you who Socrates is, and what I realized is what I'm aghast at is the so-called education system that doesn't teach the basics of thought and learning. But it's not too late. She was smart. She could make up for it. So I very gently explained who that was, and she was really interested. I think she'll go read a book about it. So,
tell her to go to Greece. Well, I actually just returned from Greece last month, and they showed me the place where he allegedly gave lectures, and there were just some ruins. Yeah.
No, I was
the Acropolis.
Yeah. Well, the Parthenon, the Acropolis is up
Parthenon,
here, but then the Forum is down in the valley, so to speak.
Yeah. So I was right there.
That is where they were. So I walked in Socrates and Plato and Aristotle's footsteps, and it is really, really cool. So read and study critical thinking. This is another great thing. I mean, I even learned this in high school and in college. We learned how to debate. We learned how to make logical arguments. We learned what's propaganda. One of the most valuable things I learned is, what are the tools of propaganda? How do we effectively overcome your rational mind and get you to do, in many cases, terrible things by manipulating your fears and your prejudices? I'm so grateful. I learned that when I was 15 or 16, and I see it played out more so than ever in our world today. So learn what is reason. What is I studied logic when I went to college. What is a logical argument? What is a logical fallacy? Logic gets a bad name in the world today. Say, you have to follow your intuition. Well, no. Yes, follow your intuition, but study logic. So really, basic things. A young person, what is logical? What is illogical? What is propaganda? And then it's actually an exercise in the Da Vinci book to take issues that you have strong feelings about and learn to look at another point of view. I actually recommend that people look at two other points of view besides the point of view that they may hold in a particular area. Because if you can't look at alternate points of view and think them through rationally, you don't know how to think.
Yeah, and you're prone to biases as well, right?
So understand that we're all prone to biases. It's the way the lower and middle level of our brains are wired. So we have to call on the cerebral cortex, the neocortex, the newer parts of the brain. That's where we're thinking logically. That's where we're accessing reason. So, look, I've made my living teaching creative thinking, but I've done it to people who have PhDs in how to think logically. So creative, intuitive thinking balances logical thinking. But first, make sure you learn logical thinking. Before you go off and just try to be intuitive and creative, learn about what is a syllogism, what is a fallacy, what is a reasonable logical argument, and then how to counter that argument with data and facts rather than with propaganda or with yelling and screaming or threatening, which are not what humanity needs. So, yes, I would tell this young person, first know that you have the potential for genius. Then read, and study logic and figure out what is a logical, sound argument, and fear and propaganda.
That is such great advice, Michael. Logical thinking, I mean, I think we need it now more than ever because we are inundated with all kinds of false information through the internet. And, the algorithms aren't doing us any good. So we're like in echo chambers now, and we have to have the ability to discern what is true, what is false, and what is even brainwashing. Are people trying to try to change our thought?
Yes.
So,
but if in the world today, with the power of our devices and the internet and so on, if you don't do what we're talking about, if you don't learn the principles of logic, if you don't learn how to make a reasonable, rational argument, if you don't learn what propaganda is, I guarantee you're being completely manipulated in all of your opinions, ideas, choices, and it's happening unconsciously. So you're becoming a slave to mostly advertisers. Leave aside the political world and the heavy-duty agendas. You're just being taken out of consciousness by people trying to sell you food and drugs that are bad for you. I mean, I like to watch basketball. It's playoff season. So I'm watching it on TV. And even though I mute the commercials, I still see the utter garbage that is being foisted on people. And what's really tragic is a lot of the advertisements are for truly junk food. And if you ate that food, then you would need to use all the drugs that are also being advertised by the pharmaceutical companies. Those are the two things I'm seeing as I'm just innocently trying to watch a basketball game. Now, if I was a young, impressionable person, I'd say, like, wow, there's my favorite celebrity eating that greasy so-called food. Maybe I should too, and then I'll jump higher and sing better or whatever. It's not rational, but it's very, very powerful. So I was walking to the Moynihan train station in New York, and I think I'm walking down, I guess it's 7th Avenue, because there was a big advertisement above Madison Square Garden, and it was an advertisement for some kind of whiskey. And it had a former NBA player holding the bottle of whiskey. So, the New York Knicks are in the playoffs. This former NBA player was a famous New York Knicks player. He's holding this very strong alcoholic beverage. And the caption above says, "Taste is everything." So I'm just walking along on my way to get my train. But because I was trained in how do you analyze propaganda, I instantly, this didn't take me long, I just looked at this and I thought, they're trying to get people to buy this thing that destroys their brain cells by using the example of a great athlete who, if he drank this, would never have been able to perform at the level he did. Maybe he's drinking it now because he's desperate and he needs the money because he spent all the fortune he made when he was a player.
Yes.
So he's drinking, drowning his sorrows and taking the money from this company. Plus the notion, taste is everything. Well, no, it isn't. Price is something.
Yeah.
Effects on your health or something. Other choices of what to spend your money on or something. And taste good. So taste is not everything. But to the impressionable young person walking past the world's greatest arena, Madison, there's the superhero of this team that I'm going to see that I'm so excited about. And he looks so cool. Wow, I want to have good taste. I want to be like him. I'm going to destroy those 100 billion brain cells by drinking that stuff. So, yeah, I want everybody to have the ability to look at an ad and be as ruthlessly critical as I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very immoral, irresponsible marketing that they're doing. Pushing
Well,
these
that's why
products.
you hear I'm angry. I can get a little worked up about this because
Yeah.
it's if you don't know this, you will be a victim of this. You will be eating things, you will be drinking things, you will be doing things that you would never choose if you had a rational understanding of what is being foisted upon you.
Right. And I think going after person's mind has been a tactic that's been done in history, like the Soviet Union and dictators, that they would all do that. Like they go straight for the mind. They find a way to get there and change the way they think, change their whole worldview.
Every power structure throughout history, with a few rare exceptions, has pretty much aimed to do that.
Right.
And the part of the quest, part of what when I was growing up, I was thinking, it was funny. When I was growing up, there was, the Vietnam War, there were race riots all over the country. It was, there was assassinations of President Kennedy and his brother and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So the world was very divisive, very tense. And I remember thinking, how do I make a difference in this world? How do I help? I thought maybe I should study politics. And I said, no, that's not it. I want to study thinking and how people can think better. Because what I saw was that people on the extreme of either position were usually not really thinking everything through. And certainly not ever really listening with an open mind to any argument that was different than their point of view. And I thought that ability, the ability to think critically, to listen, to learn, and then to think creatively to come up with new solutions, that's the most important human ability. I'm going to study that. So that's, fortunately, everything I've always done. I figured that out when I was pretty young. I was really blessed.
You were smart.
I never had to get a real job.
Wise beyond your years, obviously.
I feel like I was blessed.
Yes.
My parents were both independent thinkers. My dad's 98.
Wow.
And went to visit him a couple weeks ago, and a friend of mine brought him a book as a present. It was a book on Kabbalistic philosophy and practice. So then this friend of mine studies the Kabbalah. Yeah. But I tell you, so the people I know who are always reading, my dad, since I've known him, which is my whole life, he's always had some books piled up by his side. And my mom, when she was still alive, right until the end, literally right until I was with her 2 days before she left this world last September. She had books. She was reading right up into the end. But you got to check this out. So my dad is 98. He's in a assisted living facility. Right? He's obviously having a rough time. My mom, who he was married to for 73 years, is gone. But this friend of mine, a couple weeks ago, brought him this book as a present. So we saw him just last weekend again. And he says to this friend of mine, "Oh, I want to thank you for that book." He said, "But I have some questions about some of the arguments that were made in there. To see what you think." and then he asked her these really pointed questions. And she said to me, she said, "Well, first of all, I can't even believe that he even read the book, because, most people, you give them a present, it's like, thank you very much. They put it on their shelf."
But he actually read the book.
But he not only read it, but he
asked
a really incisive question that showed me that his critical thinking faculty is undimmed.
That's amazing.
And
at 98, that is amazing.
Right? So, and one of the things we know about preventing dementia is to be continuously learning and continuously reading and exercising your brain. Well, I know my dad has done that, and my mom did too, right? My mom was as sharp as she could be. You watch somebody, obviously it's very sad when you see a body decline. But when the mind is still sharp, if you ask me, would I rather have my body be great and my mind is gone? No, thanks. If I had to choose, I would want my mind, I would still want to be cognizant. What I'm working on is trying to have my body be great and my mind all the way through.
I totally agree with you.
Maybe we'll do a podcast on my deathbed. And
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy.
Michael, I'm curious. You mentioned technology and AI briefly earlier. Are you concerned about the impact it might have on people? Because now we're becoming increasingly reliant on AI. And in addition to that, we're living in times where it's just busier, it's noisier, there's more distractions. So are you concerned about the impact it might have on people's originality and their ability to think outside the box?
Yes. Well,
because all the geniuses you wrote about in the book lived in different times. It was quieter. They had just more time, more space. The rhythm of life was different. So what are your thoughts on that?
I love the question, and I have lots of thoughts. So, the classic Dickens lines, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." This is always true. That's why that's a classic, a genius classic work. Is the best of times or the worst of times. So the worst of times would be if all the scenarios that people are all too familiar with about what could go wrong. The best of times is you can get access to any information, any knowledge, anywhere, instantaneously and for free. And that is amazing. I mean, I've been asking AI questions and having these amazing conversations, like having a super smart friend I can have a dialogue with. And I have lots of real super smart friends, and now I have one on my device. And I was concerned about the net effect of it on humanity.
Yeah.
But then just a few weeks ago, I happened to be at this event. There's a beautiful place called Tibet House in New York City. It's one of the places where His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's connected to the Tibet House, and there's a place called Menla up in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
They have various retreats and meditations and so on. So I've been there over the years plenty of times. But this was a really interesting event that I attended. Actually, this young man, when he was in high school, he read How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And it inspired him, and he started this amazing company that does kind of AI service around the world. And this guy is a genius. And so I was at Tibet House because he was announcing the launch of this huge project where they were going to use AI to translate all of the sacred texts of ancient Tibet. So this is just a massive, massive undertaking that would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars and taking hundreds of years, except AI can probably do it for $20 million and maybe finish it in a year or two. It's so incredible that we're going to have access to this priceless knowledge rapidly through this technology. But the best part of the whole event for me was, have you heard of Robert Thurman?
Yes, I actually had him on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, well, that figures. So most people know him because he's Uma Thurman's father.
Yes. He was a delight to talk to.
He's so cool, right? So he's one of the great scholars of Tibetan Buddhism in the world. And so he addressed our group. And he talked about the deity Manjushri, who is the deity of unlimited universal divine intelligence. And someone had asked him the same question you asked me, are we worried about this? He said, he sees AI as an expression of Manjushri, that intelligence is coming forth at a level that's seemingly beyond anything we've ever been able to access directly before. So he's optimistic because Manjushri is a very positive deity. So that's my take.
How interesting. Yeah. So it is a manifestation of something bigger, something that can actually assist us in excavating our genius.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just concerned about shorter attention spans and how people sort of prefer bite-sized content as opposed to long-form content. I've noticed that as a content creator, that is something that is kind of drilled into us now. Like long-form content, like try to stay away from that because that will probably not get you as many eyeballs as snippets of information. So that's why I was wondering, what would be the consequences of that?
Great point. So the danger is to confuse short-term content. I mean, I know there's a whole business model and everything that you could just make a living with tons of useless short-term content that really doesn't do anything, just grab the eyeballs, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I see how do we grab eyeballs, short-term content, to lead you towards doing the real depth of inner work and transformation, which is not going to happen on Instagram. So in other words, and I mean, I don't know, I haven't solved that, but that's my question is, I'm not just giving everything up to I'm going to do everything I do in sound bites from now on, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I have, a social media guy. He just sent me a thing this morning on the latest strategy, but the aim is to get you to go to my 5-day seminar. First, if we can get you for 3 seconds, and then you might watch the 30-second thing, and then it's only a 3-minute read of your
even with blogging
life.
Even with blogging, they kind of dissuade you from writing long form content because they're people don't have the time or the will to scroll through all that information.
Well, the truth is they do have the time.
Okay.
What they don't have is the self-awareness. What they don't have, so the irony of this is a lot of what I'm teaching now are inner practices for regulating your nervous system and aligning your spirit, your mind, your emotions, and your body so that you can be a whole, healthy, happy, and fulfilled person. So, I teach Qigong. I'm doing a 5-day retreat at the Omega Institute the first week of June. Then I'm doing a retreat June 6th and 8th. Master Robert Peng and I are teaching a weekend retreat to elevate your baseline of life energy. This is all at the Omega Institute in upstate New York. And then later in the summer, I'm teaching a 5-day retreat called Walking Well, where we're going to walk in nature every day.
You wrote a book about that as well, right?
Yes, that's my most recent book. It's called
Your most
Walking
recent
Well.
book. Yeah.
Yes. Because no amount of blips and quick scrolls are going to give you what you get if you walk for an hour in the woods. So I just want to use all this stuff to get you to walk for an hour in the woods, because it'll do more for you than almost anything else you can do for yourself. And I can explain to you scientifically, spiritually, emotionally, physically, why it's so good for you. But first, I have to get your eyeball for 3 seconds. And then maybe you'll come to Omega, we'll walk for a week, and your life will be transformed. So that is a conundrum. It's a legitimate conundrum. And yes, of course, many people are getting more superficial, and they are suffering as a result of it. But when people are suffering, they'll start to seek answers. And maybe, I think ultimately they'll say, gee, maybe being on my phone all the time and constantly scrolling on Instagram is not going to be the path to the life that I really want.
So your prescription is returning to the body, finding some practice where you can get grounded. Because, as we know, the mind and body are connected, right?
They're not just connected, you can't separate them.
Yeah, you can't separate them. Yeah.
Right? So the somatic.
This is
the corporalitas, the sixth principle for thinking like Leonardo. So check this out. So, so I'm writing the book, Walking Well. And I just got this idea. I knew Leonardo da Vinci loved to walk. I knew it was his favorite exercise. It turns out it's the favorite exercise of most of history's greatest geniuses.
Yeah, Steve Jobs, I believe. He used to walk a lot around.
It's hard to find an example of a genius who didn't like to walk.
Yeah.
So I start studying Leonardo and what he wrote about walking, and turns out he invented the pedometer. He invented the device for measuring how far you're walking.
Wow.
How cool is that? So, yeah, if you think it like, in a way, walking well is an extension of the corporalita chapter of how to think like Leonardo da Vinci.
I wanted to touch on something that I read in your book, in one of your books, and it struck me as really profound. I'm actually going to read it because I have the excerpt here. You write that every great breakthrough is a result of complex weaving of influences, effort, and serendipity. The most advanced, creative, and original thinking is always a product of historical context and the influences of the mind of the originator. So I'd love for you to expand on that.
Sure. That's from Discover Your Genius.
Yes, Discover Your Genius.
Yeah. So, and that's where I'm there's a common notion today that sort of denigrates the individual and looks at everything in the context of the collective. And I think it's really important to look at the collective without disregarding the power of the individual. In other words, both are really important. So I was writing that to acknowledge the context, the collective, and the effect that has on a given individual. And yet, the people I put in that book were people whose individual unique contribution was so extraordinary that they deserve to be recognized, from my point of view. So, obviously context and timing and framework. I mean, maybe the greatest example of that is the invention of calculus. So most people say, wow, calculus was really hard when I went to high school or college.
Yeah, well, it made my life miserable.
Right? Well, I think I made my calculus teacher's life miserable, but that's another story. But it's one thing to say, okay, wow, something to be good at calculus. How about inventing it? How about inventing calculus? Because the mathematics that exists at the time does not allow you to work on the kind of problems you need to work on. Now, what if two people invented calculus basically at the same time in different parts of the world working on different problems. You might say, wow, it was time in human history for calculus to be invented. And fortunately, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz showed up just at that time and invented it for us. So what it suggests is that, I like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, she says there's an idea sphere. There are these ideas that are just floating around.
Yeah.
And every human,
from her book, Big Magic, right?
Right, yeah. Every human being is like an antenna. But your antenna does, yours does, but most people's antenna doesn't get good reception because there's all sorts of static because they're watching commercials about junk food and other, they're clicking on all sorts of clickbait. So that's static in your antenna. So what you want to do is go for a walk in nature, clear the static out of your antenna, and then tune in and keep a little notebook and write down what you get. That's what Leonardo said to do. That's what Edison said to do. That's what Marie. So these are practical things that all of us can do. And then we discover our own genius. And that genius might be in the context of what's happening in our family, in our community, in our company, in our country, or for the whole world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I have one more question for you, Michael, before I let you go. So in your book, you've uncovered the insights of some really innovative and strategic minds like Plato and Queen Elizabeth II. And there are two of them. You actually wrote about 10 of them, and you call them your dream team of genius.
Yes.
What can we do to create our own dream team? What are some of the steps that we can take to do that?
Well, so in Discover Your Genius, I lay out the criteria for choosing a dream team. And we already covered those. I look for some universal influence, touches the whole world. Timeless, it's not going to go away. Essentially positive, so we don't want evil genius for this exercise, right? There's enough of those to go around.
Then there are, for sure.
Right? And attributable. So basically attributable. We can pretty much attribute the Socratic method to Socrates, for example, and the birth of Western philosophy, the truth, beauty, and goodness, to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We can attribute the notion of the what he called it, the revolution of the heavenly spheres. That was the title of Copernicus's book. He made the case most convincingly. We can attribute the notion that, the Earth is at the center of the universe. We're in orbit around the sun. Copernicus gets credit for that. He just does. Brunelleschi invented 3D perspective. He really did. There were others working on it, maybe, but he publicized it, he taught it, and then he demonstrated it. So he gets the credit. Doesn't mean, Mrs. Brunelleschi doesn't get the credit, and his mother doesn't get the credit. God bless everybody. It takes a village to do anything. But Brunelleschi is a very special guy in human history, and that's why he was worth his whole chapter.
Yeah, and you actually have conversations with them in your mind. And you recommend that we do that as well with our team.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, ask yourself, what would Leonardo da Vinci say about this? What would, or maybe just even more personal, who's the smartest, wisest person you've ever met? What would they say? If you're spiritually oriented, you say, what would His Holiness say? What would Christ say? What would the Buddha say? What would Lao Tzu say? What was a question I ask myself a lot is, what does the highest level of spiritual wisdom dictate that I do in this given situation?
So we essentially have to embody their spirit when we do that.
That's what I advise. Is and you won't get it perfectly right. I don't, but that's the ballpark in which I'd like everybody to be playing.
I mean, I truly value the insights that you shared with us today. I could talk to you for ages because you have so many so much great insights and knowledge that you can share with all of us. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. And I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing in helping so many people reach a higher level of thinking and creativity.
Thank you for bringing it forth to the world and doing such a wonderful job of it. And I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Absolutely. And I just want to let our listeners and viewers know that if you're interested in buying a copy of Michael's book, Discover Your Genius, How to Think Like History's 10 Most Revolutionary Minds, along with his other fantastic books, courses, and coaching programs, make sure to visit his website, michaelgelb.com. The link will be in the description.